Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast, the podcast dedicated to healthcare security, safety, and emergency management. If you are involved with a healthcare security program or desire to be, this podcast is for you. Join the conversation as we discuss the issues that matter to healthcare security professionals while leveraging the expertise of healthcare security thought leaders and experts in personal development. And now, here's your host, Brian Hamilton.
Welcome to episode 126 of the Healthcare Security Cast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Ryan King. And before we get into today's content, I just want to remind everybody of the Pick a Prize giveaway that we are doing. With this giveaway, you have the option as the winner to select from an Amazon gift card, an IAHSS membership, or a copy of Hospital and Healthcare Security. If you're going to be studying for that CHPA, definitely a benefit to add it to your library. To enter, simply text SARNESE, that's SARNESE, to 647-372-2042. And lastly, I just want to thank and acknowledge our sponsors and collaborators, starting with 3D Network Technology. 3D Network Technology, reliability is our core value. Visit www.3dnetworktechnology.com. And Genetech, delivering security strategies for healthcare. Visit genetec.com. Also, I want to thank the sponsor of our giveaway, IAHSS Communications. Also want to thank the Change Execution Group and 360 Life Transformations, as well as Canadian Security and Omnigo Software. And now, let's get into today's show. Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Ryan King. Ryan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Now, I'm going to start off today's show the same way I start off every show, and that's by giving us an opportunity to learn more about you. So, first question I have is, who is Ryan King?
Well, Ryan King is a middle-aged guy who finds himself in the security industry, like hopefully all of us. And I was born and raised in West Virginia, big farming family, coal mining family. Moved down to Florida in '90, and I've been here ever since. And married to, truly believe, my soulmate. I have 4 wonderful children, twin 21-year-olds and a 17-year-old and a 10-year-old. So 5 years from now, I'm looking forward to the grandkids. And honestly, most of my personal life is my work life. So
Fair enough. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of folks who are listening, it's kind of the same experience where a lot of the, a lot of your personal life is really tied up in what you do because you're so passionate about it.
Well, that and also I think security comes with that public safety burden / pleasure of being 24/7 on call. So it has a tendency to work into your personal life.
Absolutely, it does. All right. So I guess actually while we're on the topic of your work, let's talk about your career path and what led to you being where you are today.
Okay. Well, I didn't always start off in security, but I will say I started off pretty young. I was about 21 years old when 9/11 happened. And I had already done a little bit of moonlighting on security on the weekends, just some industrial security after hours warehouse job. I was primarily a machinist back then. And when 9/11 happened, I just really felt I needed to contribute in a certain way. And as funny as it sounds, I wanted to be diverse from the rest of my family. So most of my family is military service. And both of my brothers ended up in the fire department, one as the chief of fire over at the NASA complex back in the 80s. And so I wanted to do something a little different. So I decided to, kind of go full into the private security world. And I found myself at a hospital here in Florida. And something just bit me. And I really knew that's what I wanted to do. And I loved the proactive approach. I loved the customer service. You weren't always dealing with the negative, like in a lot of public safety industries. And it made me a good feeling. It was something that I really jumped into. And I actually found myself going to work early, staying over late, talking with the other shifts. And, when you get to that level, you kind of found your calling. And I decided to go farther. And as I was rising up in the ranks in the security department, I went into college. And in 2013, I graduated with a dual degree a Master's of Science in Criminal Justice, and then also in Security Administration. And then I got a Bachelor's in Information Technology, because at that point I saw computers and technology really driving this industry. And at this time, which again around 2013, 2014, it was mostly still there's physical security and then there's IT. There wasn't really anybody that was kind of playing that field between the two. So kind of how I carved off my niche, and then I continued to rise the ranks. And for the past 8 years, I've had my own department.
Very nice. Now, I know one thing that you've been actively involved with, and how I got to know you was through your involvement with IAHSS and being a leader within one of those Florida chapters. Now, what has volunteer leadership meant to your career?
I'll actually counter that by saying it's meant more to me as a person than it actually did my career. And,
Okay.
and that's not a negative. Again, when you have kids, you always feel like you're doing stuff for other people anyway.
Yeah.
You put yourself last, going to school until 2:00 in the morning to try to get that degree. But with doing that, the two things it added to me is it kind of made my small world bigger. I no longer was looking at at that time, 3-hospital system, and it wasn't just us. Here's our culture. Here's what I know our admin will do. You had this bigger view of what security as an industry was. At that same time, it also kind of gave me my passion that's led me to do things like this podcast, be able to write articles, start a blog, which we'll talk about later, and things like that. Because what I found is there's not as much representation outside of IAHSS for healthcare as you would think. Everybody kind of takes this big brush to security, and it's everything from airline to tourism to campus to industrial and we all have completely different makeups. Probably the only thing that's similar is we wear a uniform. So I saw a need, and in that need, I found a passion to be able to help people. And I think honestly, not being paid for it adds passion 10 times more. That's one reason I like the servant piece, because you're going into it just to help, and everybody else reciprocates that their own way, and you all learn from it.
Awesome. No, and I can definitely agree and really relate. A lot of that does resonate for me that you've said there. It's been basically my experience with it as well. Now, the other thing that I'm kind of curious to know, again, we've talked a little bit about your career path and how the volunteer leadership has impacted you. Who are some of the people that you would identify as people who are either mentors or who have kind of helped you find your way in the industry?
Well, I definitely got to say the primary one was my former chief, which was Mickey Watson. He definitely groomed me specifically for administration and leadership. I had worked at the healthcare organization that we were at for about 5 years, I believe, before he came along. And I'm not too embarrassed to say we were flashlights and keys. That's basically what we were, unlock this door, make sure nobody comes through this fence. That's about the job. He showed me how to take that bare bones and make a true public safety department out of it, and how to do it, as he would say, gently but vigorously. We're going to shake up the world over the next 3 years, but it's not going to be painful and stick and carrot approach. He just has a way with people and a way to be able to present things in that light. And the reason I call him probably my most influential mentor is 6 years under his leadership, we got to go from the very beginning to a very proactive, well-recognized, nationally ranked public safety department, and all the pains and tribulations that come with that. And it prepared me, because when I took on the facilities that I am at now, I had to do the same thing. It was basically one sheet paper, post orders, great bunch of men and women in uniform, but no structure. It was basically observe and report. And I was able to take all those same lessons in that same blueprint and grow that. And one other major mentor I kind of want to throw out there, he's probably lesser known to most people, and unfortunately he passed a few years ago, but Joseph Phipps was my field training officer when I was an officer, very green in a pair of boots. And he was a former Philadelphia policeman, patrolman of over 20 years, never wanted administration. He was one of those, he just loved the patrol beat. And He was flavorful and very bombastic, and I'll put it that way. But at the same time, he kept you safe. There was no qualms about, all right, meet me behind the building. We got to have a talk. And he would straighten you out if you did something wrong. But it was all in good heart. And everything I know about keeping myself and my officers safe doing this job came from him.
Awesome. Now, where I kind of want to shift gears and focus on now is, one of the things that you actually mentioned on your blog, again, we'll make sure everybody knows where to find your blog before before we complete this conversation today for sure. But the line and dot theory that you discuss, can you unpack that for us?
Sure. So it was a philosophy or methodology, whichever you want to call it, that I designed back when I was in college. And going for that dual degree I mentioned with criminal justice and security, we had a lot of law enforcement officers that were looking for a career change into security, which there are other people that have books out and other things out. So we know that there's a little bit of a migration path. It's not a one-to-one. But at the same time, I saw a lot of security folks that had 10, 15 or more years in security that wanted to move into law enforcement. And what I saw is even the professors in college was painting this as if you can just shuffle the skills back and forth. If you're a good security officer, you can be a police officer. If you're a good police officer, you can be a security officer. And then when I would listen to them describe the jobs and describe the skills that we would need for our careers, it was as if I didn't know which one I was going to. I didn't know whether I was getting trained to be a police officer or a security officer. So in that, I developed this line dot theory, and it kind of stuck and it helped a lot of people in the class, and I've kind of carried it on since then. So what it is, it can be used for anything: emergency management, safety, almost anything in the public safety realm. And if you imagine an incident, the entire continuum of that incident has a line, a horizontal line. And then the apex of that incident is the dot. So let's say the active shooter, at the moment he starts shooting people arriving on your campus, that's the dot. Somebody slipped and fell on something in your hospital, that's the dot, is the slip and fall. Everything to the left of that dot is pre-incident indicators. Those are things that could have been proactively taken care of to keep the incident from happening in the first place. Everything after that dot is the reactionary or the response piece. Neither one is good or bad, but they're completely different roles. So how I described it to the law enforcement folks was that, primarily their job is response. They have some preventative measures, but just as the design of their job, they're waiting on the 911 call. Even some of their jurisdiction can only happen once a crime has been in progress or imminently going to be committed. So they're primarily on that response side. So's fire, so's EMS. Security and safety, and if you look at preparedness and mitigation activities for emergency management, tend to be on that pre-active side. So they're on the left. And I told them, I'm like, I consider my job, I failed if we get to that incident. If somebody slipped and fell, I missed some things that could have persuaded that from happening. If we get to an active shooter, then obviously somebody with a firearm was able to breach your perimeter and get inside. So I started separating those jobs by using the line and dot by saying, we can obviously cross over into each other. You have a gunshot victim pull up in your hospital. It's already done. Now you're containing the evidence, trying to package the scene, control pedestrian traffic, but for the most part, we in security should try to stay to the left of that dot. So a lot of times people always say, hey, let's look at the left. We need to focus on the left of something. That's the basics of it.
Okay. And no, that makes perfect sense to me, the way that you kind of broken it down there. Have you had any kind of counter thoughts or any pushback in regards to your methodology?
Only in that it's a mental shift for some people to make that. And I think it's because a lot of law enforcement come over to security. So they're taking those indicators of criminal abatement and kind of applying that to everything. And meaning we have an officer in uniform to create a presence to keep somebody from committing assault or wanting to do an active shooter case or wanting to steal something. Well, you're totally focused on the criminality side of the security world and not the other pieces. Sometimes I have security on the other side, like, well, we're not trained, and there is some truth in this, and I have a future plan for that. But they're like, well, we're not trained what to do in an active shooter. And I'm like, well, you're absolutely right. So what can you do proactively? We can assist in directing people to the quickest ways out of the units that we find ourselves in. We have to make sure we keep ourselves safe. Now, if you're a sworn department of security, of course, this can run the gambit of anything. But as your traditional, I would still say kind of the larger part of our market, even if we are armed, we're not expected to be first responders. It's there for self-protection or for immediate third person. So you're taking a lot of the same run, hide, fight actions as everybody else is. We're not there to try to stop the active shooter. That's to the right. That's where law enforcement comes in at. So it's staying in our proper lane. I'll give you an example. So this is usually what I follow up when I teach our guys in orientation about this. I'll give you two most popular examples I get. One of them, you hear a lot of people say zero tolerance for workplace violence. Okay. And to me, that's completely wrong. You're on the right side of the dot. Okay. If you're going to have zero tolerance, that means you're reacting to violence that happened, or you're looking at a punitive measure. We're going to file charges. We're going to not allow visitors to your room, whatever the case is. Well, you're reacting. My thing is we should be focused on zero incidents. Now, I'm not saying realistically everybody can get to zero incidents, but that should be your focus. I'm trying to go for non-escalation, not de-escalation of people. I always found it funny, and this is part of the example I give, is we hear healthcare is the highest number for workplace violence. Next to that is probably mental health facilities and so forth. Have you ever noticed you don't hear counselors, AA meetings, Narcotics Anonymous, rehabs, first steps, and all them? And yet those people are highly acute with a very known history of violence and other things that impede good behavior. And they don't have those. And to me, the sole reason is because they're taught how to talk to people in the first place, how to deliver that bad piece of news, how to be empathetic, how to listen to people, how to do all those things that we try to say to do in de-escalation. But if you're calling security, or the nurses are calling security to show up to de-escalate something, that means something has already happened. You've missed the opportunity. The other one, and this one gets a lot of people chuckles, so anybody can use this, no copyright on this. This always gets people chuckles, is I tell people, I'm going to use a fire extinguisher analogy because I love analogies. It's a way to get out of the business speak that we all find ourselves wrapped in. And I said, if I train everybody to bring a fire extinguisher to a fire, it hopefully helps put out the fire, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But does it stop the number of fires in the first place?
No, I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, that's a that's a great way to summarize it.
It's a simple thing. De-escalation training teaches you how to de-escalate, but you're not going to reduce the numbers of violence. Even if you keep it at a verbal violence, you're still not, according to OSHA and the new Joint Commission rulings, everything, you're still not reducing the violence.
Right.
So we keep focusing on the right, thinking we're on the left.
No, it's very good, and I'm actually curious to ask you where. What made you think of the terminology? Well, the specific terminology, non-escalation, because the first time I actually saw that terminology was, it was in some Vistalar training. I've heard some people say, kind of give similar concepts with different terminology, but it's always made perfect sense to me. You want to kind of sorry, I'm going right into the wrong word there. De-escalate. You want to prevent the escalation before it even happens. One of the security officers I used to work with, and I've shared the story before, but he used to do a really great job of when people came into the emergency department and it was his post, he was very proactive about engaging them when they first came in, having conversations with them, and really just, it was really that non-escalation effect in play, because whenever he was working there, and I loved it when I worked with him and he started the shift at the emerge post, because I knew he was really going to set the tone for the night, and we likely weren't going to have a lot of calls back there. But he would just engage everybody, have conversations with them. And, even when things went wrong or somebody got skipped, like during the triage process, and the wrong person got triaged first, he had already engaged them and they were more understanding, I found. And, again, things usually didn't escalate. Again, I kind of shared a story there and got away from my question, but yeah, what is it that kind of made you shift to that non-escalation terminology?
It's again, trying to stay ahead of the problem, saying that, we will have zero incidents should be the goal. May not be absolutely realistic, but it should be the goal.
Right.
Not having to de-escalate somebody should be the goal. Now, we're all going to have people that come off the EMS truck totally escalated the minute they come in.
Right.
There's nothing you can do, but the goal should not be, I'm going to work my zone, wait for nurses to call me back to ED 14, and then come in where there was somebody that's screaming and pumping their fist at someone. We've missed the opportunity. We're already past the dot. And so some of the things that I say when you're looking at workplace violence or anything, and just because I know that's the huge thing everybody's focused on right now, I'm using that for more examples. But again, the line dot can be used for slip and falls or anything. If you want to look at workplace violence, some things you can look at is trained psychiatric sitters. They can go through the 6-week course. They get the psychiatric sitting training that lets them understand when somebody is starting to move towards anxiety attacks or when somebody is starting to move towards this. Because they're the sitters, which a lot of hospitals use, they have different terms, observers, sitters, and so forth. But most people do kind of use those for one-to-one. By giving them the skills to not wait until the person's getting out of bed and trying to do all this other stuff, you're helping prevent it. Flagging previous behavior. Okay, we're not going to profile this person, but at the same time, we know that they've tried to go AMA or they've tried to elope before, or we've had issues with them before. So when they come in, we're going to take care of emergency medical needs. And then right after that, case manager, security, and his nurse are going to come inside and we're going to set down a 12-hour plan. You meet these, this is what we're going to do for you. And you make it clear so they don't have to wonder what they're going to deal with, things like that. Other ones even go to facility design, so I know a lot of facilities, including my previous one, we had roll down shutters in certain rooms that could be swung from behavioral rooms into psych rooms. Now, the one thing that I will add that was not done at my previous, or I haven't seen done in other hospitals I've toured, is if you're going to all that work to put money into a room and you're making it institutionalized, you're adding anxiety to the person. If I was to set you in an all-white room with metal roll-down shutters, no music, no nothing, EDs are cold, period, and we've removed all your clothes except a gown and a blanket from you, you're probably going to escalate. We see the dot coming, okay? So what about while you're renovating those rooms, you put in blue paint for the ceiling, make it more sky-colored, make it more muted colors. Those rooms specifically, there's maybe a different type of music that's kind of a lo-fi, no words, kind of small volume, not like typical waiting room, loud volume, and all this other stuff in an area that's away from the main ED. So if they do act up or they cry or they yell, they're not disturbing other patients, creating more incidents and everything. It's all these little things to how can we keep them from escalating? I can tell you when I was an officer, the easiest thing I did, and I was kind of like your officer, as you mentioned earlier, everybody kept putting me in. I'm 5'6" and 160 pounds, and they kept putting me with all the really challenging patients. And the whole thing is, right when I took shift, I would ask the nurse, is he NPO? Is he allowed to eat? Is he allowed to drink? Is there anything I'm not allowed to bring him besides the obvious contraband to a psych room? And if they told me no, hey, bro, you hungry? You want a sandwich? You want some water? What type of juice do you like? What does he need? You're going to be here a while. I'm going to be stuck here with you too. So you want to watch something on TV? You want me to get your deck of cards? What do you want to do? And all of a sudden it's like, yeah, they don't want to be there. Truth be told, at the time, I didn't want to be there and everything, but we found a way to make a partnership out of this and keep the person from de-escalating. Escalating. And what I found was the people will sit and talk to you. And even if they're starting to get nervous, hey, I think I need something, man. I'm starting to get jittery. I'm starting to get itchy, whatever. And I can relay that to the nurse. And all these little things that I've thrown out there are things to try to stay to the left instead of just focused on, are we trained in restraints? Are we trained in de-escalation? Are we trained in taser or use of force or whatever the case is? You're training for the response. And I think that's where some of the confusion that I was seeing even in college, and hence the reason I stick with the line dot method.
No, that all makes perfect sense. That's great stuff. Now, the other thing that you mentioned in all of that, well, I guess when we look at the non-escalation piece, which you described very well there, a big part of that is communication. Now, communication, you talked about some future training thoughts that you have as well, and where we may have some gaps currently. Communication is a huge part of the equation.
Yeah.
I guess, how are some of the ways you're effectively training your officers to communicate and be more proactive in, taking that non-escalation approach?
So we have roll call at the beginning of every shift. And basically the outgoing supervisor prior to roll call circulates through all of the zones, all the officers go zones, and gets a one-on-one report from them. I've never liked, nor do I trust third-hand knowledge. So when I was running a shift, I'm going to check on every zone and every post and hear from them any concerns, anything I need to know, whatever. And when the oncoming shift is coming in, I would then brief the oncoming supervisor and the entire team to what went on during our shift, any Baker Acts we have, any other psych holds, substance abuse holds, medical concerns, confusion, sundowner syndrome patients that we know like to wander, anything like that. And we have a huge grease board in our room, and we put down all of those rooms. And then I challenge every shift that when they're rounding on those patients to find one thing that patient likes. And a lot of times we all just come straight out and ask them, what's your favorite ice cream? You like vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, what do you like? And then we make sure before we start our rounds on those units, we stop by the nutritional department, we pick up a couple of things, ice cream, and we take it up to that unit. Hey, just checking on you. My name's Bob. Is there anything you need? And we really work on trying, hey, somebody's actually talking about me. Hey, this guy knows that I like this or like that, and it builds a rapport. And there's been a lot of times where a patient and a nurse, and we won't get into who started what, but a patient and nurse is not gelling together. And, the patient will actually ask to call security. And when we get up there, they feel more comfortable talking to us because they feel heard. And that goes a long way to, calm those situations down and get ahead of those situations before they escalate. Also, the nurses see that we have a relationship. So sometimes when the person starts acting up, they'll call us truly proactively and still waiting until it's like a code silver or something to get up there and go talk to them.
Awesome. No, that's good stuff. Now, the other thing too, I want to take a deeper look at is, again, when we're looking at the left of that dot,
Yep.
I want to do a deeper dive of some of the elements that we're looking at there. So things, again, like prevention, and we look at those 3Ds: detect, deter, and delay. What are your kind of thoughts on, our roles within that left side of the dot?
Well, I think the roles should always be protective. If we remember that protective piece, and again, when we're working with a lot of folks in our industry that were law enforcement, it's a hard concept to get around because they are protection officers. They wear a shield for a reason. They've always been considered protective. But like I said, the pure design of how they work is largely responsive. So there's always been this conflict in understanding what's truly protective. And I think we get focused on physical protection, whether it be of the structure or of the person, and not some of these other things. So some examples is I make sure that our brand is also protected. We want to make sure that there's not a lot of slander going on and people aren't walking around the lobbies with cell phones out recording stuff. And hey, what's the problem? I mean, obviously you're upset if we're bringing out the iPhone. Tell me what's going on. Let me see if I can try to help. Contrary to what a lot of security leaders agree with, I very openly and very happily took all of the property loss claims in our hospital. So we run almost 3,000 pieces of patient missing property reports a year through our departments. Now it's between all the hospitals, but the way I look at it is we're either losing customer satisfaction scores, or we're losing reputation, or we're losing trust in people's personal property. And we are asset protection above and beyond anything. So to me, that doesn't stop at the hospital's assets. That belongs to everybody inside. You wouldn't turn away a nurse that somebody said stole their purse. So why do we think any different about a patient? So I think that's some ways to kind of move to the left side of things. Another way is, although access control and lightings and cameras and kind of those traditional security measures, we need them. We absolutely need them. We rely on them. But people need to realize those are largely protective of your type 1 workplace violence crimes, your criminal style crimes, your vandalism, your burglary, your assaults, whatever. When you're looking at type 2, which is 80% of all the workplace violence we face, you really need to be looking at SEPTED, and you need to be looking at those things that de-escalate. I would even say SEPTED from a line of how I was describing the mental health rooms earlier. That's a piece of SEPTED too. I am trying to keep a felony assault from happening within my campus. So we look at things like that. Now, to shift away from security, but to go to kind of the safety model that many of us have anyway too. What I would say is, instead of waiting until somebody slips and falls, then run back video and see if the floor was wet and all this other stuff, if every 100 foot down a hallway or strategically placed, you have those cones and the holders up against the wall, that any staff member, the first person that sees it, it's readily available. They're not trying to call EVS. They don't have to remember to go back to their office and do this. Pop out a cone, throw it on the floor. You now have awareness, greatly decreasing the amount of slip and falls. I've been talking with a vendor that we're trying to work on something to where you can actually have an input point tied into those cone receptacles, that when you pop one of those cones out of the holder, it sends back a little blip, kind of like a door alarm, to the access control system and lets you know that a cone's been deployed. So an officer, whether it be EVS or security, can go check out the area and see what needs to be cleaned. So reducing the amount of time the floor stays wet, reducing the amount of chances of slip and fall. So all these little things are trying to stay over to that left-hand side of things.
Excellent. Now, I want to actually do a deeper dive into something else. So again, I'll say, going back to when I first met you, I had heard about you before I met you because, again, everything that you were doing in that Florida chapter garnered some attention and people were talking about you. So when I had the opportunity to meet you, I made sure I pulled you aside and spoke with you. You're always someone who has been, I've had a lot of respect for. Very smart guy, obviously know a lot about the industry. And fortunately for everyone who's listening to our conversation today, you've decided to share what you know as well. And you've recently entered the blogging world. So if you could, I'd love for you to talk to us about that.
Sure. The first thing I will put out there is I cannot create a blog from scratch very well. So I hired somebody to make the site. I take no credit for the site, just the content. Yeah, so I entered into the blogging world and I created focusedhealthcaresecurity.com. Hopefully, eventually I'll get that down to FHS. That's what I'm hoping. But it really is in the name. I want to be focused on healthcare and the security industry. And I took that blog and I separated it into what I believe are kind of the major elements we all deal with, which is security, emergency management, security technology, and then workplace violence and leadership. So that's kind of how the blog is separated up. And again, there's other great security industries out there. I obviously like IAHSS the best because it is focused and, still work with the certification council on that and everything. But a lot of the other industry publications and representatives, their healthcare piece is 1/5 of their market because, again, they have that casino tourism, cybersecurity, and I was joking with some people when I was creating the blog. I'm like, just try to query for a security director's job. I guarantee you 90% of the findings is going to come up as a security information security officer, and you try to type in physical and nobody knows what that word means. So, I wanted to make a blog that was specifically to our people, focused on healthcare, but also I keep it very politically correct, but at the same time, I have very frank conversations. That's why I use these analogies. That's why I'm like, hey, you wouldn't consider a fire extinguisher fire prevention, and so why are you sitting here using this term for this? We just have very open conversations, very, simple and direct things. My goal is not necessarily for people to say, hey, I'm a consultant and this is the way you should do it. It's more, have you thought of this? Have you thought of it in this light? Have you looked at this flavor? One that I just got finished writing, I'll be publishing soon, is it's just metrics. Stop being scared of it. It's numbers, and I guarantee you're already pulling the numbers. It's usually a problem in you may not be properly presenting the numbers to get what you need out of the C-suite. So it's really focused on that manager or that director or leadership level to try to give them some assistance in getting the respect and the resources they need for their security department.
Absolutely. Now, I guess before we start to wrap things up, is there anything else that you'd like to share that I didn't ask you about today, or that we just didn't have a chance to get to this point?
Not really. I want to add one more thing to the line dot piece. So
Sure.
on the staying to the left side of that, there's another thing that I think does not get a lot of attention. And I'm guilty myself. I have a great FTO that sometimes keeps me in check on this. And we get really focused on policy and procedure. And we get really focused on, do you have this background or do you have that background? And I have to remind myself, the real proactive approaches is things like how your uniform is perceived. Some places a hard uniform works better. Let's say inner city, large hospitals, known gangs, things like that. There's some places that a softer profile may work well. One of my hospitals is over 70% senior citizen population. I can't go walking around looking like a SWAT team member, so you have to take those type of approaches. Our labor and delivery unit, I only place female officers because I believe there is a sensitivity and a relationship that you are just not going to get, no matter how great a male officer you may have. Putting them up there in that role with women that are honestly in the greatest day of their life and everything else, they want that female companionship and that female connection up there. Now, at the same time, my ED person, I don't need somebody 5 foot and 100 pounds if we have known issues there. So part of that staying to the left should include your FTO training and selection of officers to make sure you're fitting the right officer for the right role. A lot of us do that when we have our FTO. You want somebody that speaks well. You want somebody that's able to train, formulate a lesson plan, but we don't take that same personality view when it comes to all of our zones and making sure that they're best fit for those zones. So to me, it's a big part of saying on the left-hand side to put the right people in the right place.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And even what you described there, it's going to translate to great diversity within your team too, and having a lot of different skill sets covered. So no, that makes sense. All right. Now, because you're still listening to this point and you want to hear more from Ryan, Ryan did also interview with myself and Mike Hodges on the Proactive Security podcast. So I do have that linked below as well. So make sure to check that out, because some of the concepts that Ryan was just talking about, especially in terms of uniforms and things of that nature, we did go into greater depth in that discussion. Now, Ryan, do you have a special message to share with the Healthcare Security Cast community?
I really think security, especially with what's happened in 2020 and 2021, we are poised to make great leaps ahead if we prepare ourselves. Law enforcement kind of moved away from, and I'm going to use a dirty word, but we moved away from the pig reputation and all this other stuff after 9/11 because people saw how essential it was. And I really think security, maybe a little bit because of the negative focus on law enforcement right now, security is going to provide even a bigger role in the future for citizen and civilian level protection and things like that. And I hope everybody knows business acumen, technology acumen, the whole package. Our industry is changing, and for those people that are poised for that to change, I really see the next 10 years to be a huge professional leap for our industry.
Awesome stuff. Now, I'm just going to plug the blog one more time, focusedhealthcaresecurity.com. Ryan, what are some of the best ways for us to connect with you? And again, I'd encourage anybody who's still listening to the conversation to connect with Ryan, because again, he's just a great guy, wealth of knowledge. But what are the best ways for us to do that?
The blog messaging site, that comes directly to me, or also I am on LinkedIn. Hit me up anytime. If you're in the industry and you hit me up on one of those two, I'll even share my cell phone number. I really just want to help the industry, help people where I can, as well as learn from others that have more experience than me.
Awesome stuff. Well, Ryan, again, thanks for taking the time today. I greatly appreciate you taking the time, and always enjoy a conversation with you. So again, thanks for the time.
I appreciate it very much.
The Healthcare Security Cast is available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music and Audible, and many other platforms as well. Check out our Linktree on your computer or mobile device. And this can be found at linktree/Brian Hamilton. That's linktr.ee/Brian, B-R-I-N-E, Hamilton. Again, that's linktr.ee/Brian Hamilton. Or if it's easier, send me a text at 647-3 647-372-2042. That's 647-372-2042. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have or share any links you may be looking for. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, take care and stay safe.